Where's our clerk?
You just passed them down.
Here, with Ben.
Walk along the front, and you can see the names.
Clerk. Bruce.
I want to see you on TV, you know.
Thank you.
Are you ready to go, Madam Clerk?
Oh, thank you.
Thanks.
Very nice. Thank you very much.
The meeting.
The party?
I'm pouring you some water.
Message on the radio board. Send every 5 seconds.
Are you ready? The November 3rd, 2009 meeting of the Sammamish City Council will come to order. Madam Clerk, would you please read the roll?
Mayor Don Sharon.
Present?
Deputy Mayor Josh Berry.
Present.
Councilmember Lee Felling.
Here.
Councilmember Mark Cross.
Present.
Councilmember Kathy Huckabee.
Present.
Councilmember Michelle Petiti.
I'm here.
Yeah. It's a rock concert.
Yeah.
Councilmember Nancy Whitten.
Here.
Eastlake Student Liaison.
Present.
Skyline Student Liaison.
Present.
Thank you. Ben, Skyline Student Liaison, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
I pledge of allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America
And to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, next is public comment, and this is an opportunity for the public to address the council. A 3-minute limit per person or 5 minutes if representing the official position of a recognized community organization. Do we have a sign-up list? Is there anybody that would like to address the council? No? Nobody tonight? Okay. Next is the approval of the agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda?
A request to, under the consent agenda, to remove item 5 for a brief discussion under new business.
Okay. Any other suggested changes? No. If there are no objections, the agenda as amended or changed is approved. Next are the student liaison reports. Eastlake High School, Maddie March.
Okay, so at Eastlake, our first quarter just ended. On November 7th, we're having our annual Holiday Bazaar. It's a school fundraiser put on by our PTSA, and businesses from our community or clubs at our school put on booths and sell items for the holiday season. On November 10th, we have our Veterans Day Assembly, and then on November 11th, there's no school to honor veterans. And then on the 19th through the 21st, we have our fall play. This year it's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And there's going to be a student night for that with a pasta feed. On November 13th, Leadership is putting on an event where we have dance instructors coming, and students can come and learn different new moves, and there'll be a pasta feed with that. On November 23rd, there's a Battle of the Bands, and that's a senior class fundraiser, and all the public is welcome to come watch. And this Saturday, our football team plays Jackson in the state playoffs. Our cross country is in Pasco for state as well, and we're defending champs, so we'll hope we'll bring it home again. And then girls soccer plays Saturday as well.
Great, thank you, Maddie. Ben, what's happening at Skyline?
At Skyline, we have fall sports. Currently, our swim team just recently went to Kinko, where a bunch of our swimmers placed, and some are even going to state and districts, which is we're very proud of them. Football, we're also going to the playoffs. That's coming this Friday. It's a home game, so if you guys want to come and cheer on us, that'd be great. Also, we have soccer, our soccer season. This Friday, we're facing against Issaquah, and so it's very spirited. A lot of people are planning on showing. Yeah, the spirit is just very high in Skyline right now. And ASB is also planning Veterans Day weeks and activities such as sending letters to soldiers, both who are stationed in Iraq and also here from the local. And also, our first quarter just ended, and a play that we recently just had called Death Trap shown for a couple days, and a lot of people went. And we're also planning Winter Wonder Week, which is going to be in the last week of November up until winter break. And we're going to have some events like the food drive, passing out blankets to the homeless shelters, and also like kid daycares for a night. So, yeah.
Great. Lots of things happening. Just out of curiosity, where does your swimming team practice?
They practice at the Klahani pools. Yeah, and their meets are at the Issaquah Bone Pool.
Uh-huh.
So, yep, they practice, I think, from like 3:30 to 5:30 every day. It's
Good.
rigorous.
Thank you. Next are presentations and proclamations.
Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to make a brief note of something that occurred this weekend. We're, of course, having elections tonight, and it's a demonstration that we're a country of laws. What I want to note is something that really is an indication of horrible lawlessness, and that was the killing of a Seattle police officer this weekend. It's a terrible tragedy when any police officer is killed in line of duty. This was particularly chilling because from the accounts that I read, it appears the killer was intent on just killing a police officer, any police officer. It could have been one of our sheriff's deputies. It turned out it was a Seattle police officer. And that makes it particularly awful. And so I just wanted to suggest that we just take a moment of silence to remember Officer Timothy Brenton of the Seattle Police Department. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would also comment, it's especially tragic for his family. I mean, he had 2 young children and a wife who's left a widow. So it's always heartrending when any official is just basically assassinated for no known reason, just sitting there going over reports. But when it leaves a family, it's especially hard on the community.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Ben, Mr. City Manager.
We share all those council's concerns, and we actually lower the city flag and up there in honoring the memory of our police officer, and it's a tragic incident that we all have experienced here, that we're all saddened with what happened.
Thank you, Ben. Next is the consent agenda, and we've removed item 5. So what's remaining is the payroll for a period ending October 15th for pay date October 20th in the amount of $245,087.92. Approval of the claims for a period ending November 3rd. Approval of the minutes for the October 6th regular meeting. Contract for on-call electrical service with Sequoia. And a contract for graphic design services with Uproar Advertising. If there are no objections to the consent agenda, the consent agenda is approved.
Thank you.
Next is-
Are you asking if any of us have objections?
That's right.
No.
Thank you. I had a pregnant pause in there.
It wasn't pregnant enough.
Okay, next are item number 6, which is the ordinance, this is the second reading, vacating a portion of the unopened Thomas Alexander Road. Mr. City Manager?
Mr. Mayor, I can make this thing very quick. Our Public Works Director is standing up there. This is a second reading of the ordinance. If you remember at the last meeting that we had asked the applicant and the neighbors of the applicant to work through the details of how city could vacate this portion, yet still maintain the easements for all those folks that are getting easement from this particular right-of-way. As of Friday, they were still working hard on this thing, but we don't have an agreement at this point. So what we're going to ask for you tonight to, if there's anybody to provide a public testimony, let's take the testimony, and then to close the hearing, but postpone the council action till January 8th meeting, and hopefully by then we will have the agreement among the all parties that are involved in this thing.
And just for clarification, if we close the hearing tonight, when we have the actual vote taken, we'll take public comment at that time
Yes, sir.
also. Yes, Nancy?
Why do we want to close the hearing? I mean, we go through this every time. I want to hear from the owners. I want them to have a full opportunity at a hearing or public comment, whichever it is, that I can consider equally in saying yes or no on that issue, because taking away somebody's public access when they're already using it or might be using it to access their property is of great concern to me, and I want to make sure they have consensus and that they're open to it. So, I mean, I'd be much happier if we left the hearing open.
We're at the council's pleasure, so we'll do whatever the council would like to do. The reason that I recommended that for twofold. Number one, all the parties were potentially very involved, provided already testimony. Number two, that if there's no agreement with all involved parties, staff would recommend that we not vacate this particular right-of-way. I think those are the two reasons. But if the council's pleasure to keep it open until January 8th, that's perfectly fine too.
Okay. Well, first we will open it. Public hearing is now open. Is there anybody that would like to comment? Okay. Well, we will continue the public hearing till January 8th. Is there any council questions for staff? Nancy?
The proposed two-lot, short lot plat, as it would be revised by, or a boundary line adjustment, attachment 3, Exhibit 3, goes over, the way they've shown it on their map, the access to the back lot of the proposed boundary line adjusted lot, where the existing house is, as I understand it, goes through skinny access, what looks like an access point for the back lot.
And then the question is?
I would hate to see two driveways coming out at the same point, right next to each other. I know that's always been a road standard to not have that. So if you give them a wider access to the back lot, I think you need to make it coextensive with the purple line is the existing right-of-way for those folks. The next exhibit, I'm sorry.
Actually, I can respond to that question tonight. The access that will be in place following the boundary line adjustment, assuming that the council does vacate Thomas Alexander Road, the access that will be in place will be the exact same access that's there today.
Can you go to the next exhibit?
I don't have the exhibits on the slides that you have in your
I see.
in your packet. This is
This one.
this one here, Councilmember Witten, the one I had up on the screen is what it will look like assuming the vacation occurs and the easement agreement occurs between all of the parties.
Can I just show you this and
Sure.
ask you? 'Cause
It's possible the drawing isn't reflecting reality, because it does show, I know what she's talking about here.
proposed. Shows two driveways coming
It shows a driveway on parcel 9002,
Driveway's coming in.
purple driveway.
would be expanded
And
by
906.
Okay, that's my concern, thank you. It's that this whole proposed area be subject to an easement.
Correct. Yeah, the driveway actually exists today
Yes, that's it.
on this parcel right here. So where this driveway access is shown here is where it exists today. It's on this parcel. It's used by this parcel and the parcel to the east right now. If the vacation occurs, so this area in here would be vacated, this driveway here that exists today would stay in its exact location as it exists in the field today, and it would provide access to this new lot, the existing lot to the east, and this existing lot to the north.
But my point was, as I agreed with Ben, the width of that whole entrance should be available to everybody under an easement agreement.
Correct, yes, and it will be, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, good. Any other questions for John? Nope? Okay, so then this item is continued on until January 8th, right?
Thank you.
And we may, hopefully we'll get the agreement by then. If not, then we'll postpone it one more time.
Okay, next is item 7. The public hearing regarding temporary interim siting hierarchy for wireless communications facilities. And Cameron, are you in charge of this one?
I am, and Melanie, the clerk, is going to hand out a substitute ordinance. Start off by apologizing. We had an error in your packet and included the wrong emergency ordinance. As the council will recall, we have adopted a number of emergency ordinances dealing with wireless communications facilities, and I apologize, we grabbed the wrong one for the packet. Melanie had a sharp enough eye to find the correct one, and so we got the copies of the correct one for you here tonight. This is simply an ordinance that extends an ordinance that you adopted earlier this year by an additional 6 months. As we said then, we are working at the Planning Commission right now to bring all of those changes that have been done through various emergency ordinances into a formal amendment to our wireless chapter. That is not yet completed at the Planning Commission. In fact, they're holding their public hearing this Thursday. So it is making its way there, but the current emergency ordinances will expire unless we take this one last action. So we have the correct ordinance now being distributed. This is the one that, again, adds co-location to the top of the siting hierarchy and makes a couple of other smaller scale changes that I'd be happy to go over if the council wants to, but it's a fairly straightforward thing. You adopted essentially this ordinance back in May of 2009, so this would extend it out one more 6-month period. That'll allow us to complete the work at Planning Commission, bring it to the council, and get the formal ordinance adopted before this one expires.
Okay, questions for staff?
I move we support the ordinance for extension.
This is a first reading of it, right?
That's right, and as we talked with Bruce about, I think normally we've been doing these things as emergency ordinances where you would suspend your rules and just do it in a single meeting. Since this emergency ordinance has already been in effect, it's an extension. We did choose to follow your normal process of first and second reading, so tonight would be the first reading. My suggestion is that we consider adding this to a consent agenda for your next session in 2 weeks. Keep things simple.
That sounds good. Everybody agree to that?
Yeah.
Okay, so the second reading will be on the consent agenda at our next meeting. Good. Thank you, Cameron. Okay, moving right along. Next is Lyman's on board. We now take item 5, which is the bid award for network storage with Ivoxy Consulting.
Yes.
That's item number 5. And we're talking terabytes now.
Terabytes,
Is it terabytes or terabits?
Terabyte.
I think trillions,
Terabytes.
terabytes, and that's coming from the federal terms.
Very good.
Okay. Mr. Mayor, Mr. City Manager, members of the council, I have my technical support here as backup. So Matt is here in case you have technical questions that I'm unable to answer.
We just asked one. The city manager knew it, though.
I know he's so versatile. It's great.
Melanie, can you turn our screens on?
Mine is on.
Mine wasn't.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Okay. What you have before you is authorization for the city manager to enter into an agreement or to authorize the purchase of some network hardware and software. This is a huge investment in our IT infrastructure. According to Matt, this is probably at this particular point our single most important IT expenditure that we've taken to date. Yes, we acknowledge it is very expensive. We had budgeted originally, when we had done our research, $240,000 for this particular endeavor. Matt was able to basically get the cost down to about $193,000. So we have a savings of about $47,000. We don't want to be left behind in Public Works and Parks in their cost savings of this year. So Matt did a really nice job of working with the folks in getting that down. Basically, this is going to provide us with a long-term capacity and capability. It's a foundation that we're building for the future. We are almost out here at City Hall of data storage. We've been actually pulling data off of our servers in order to free up enough space for us to operate. The City Hall capacity through this endeavor would be 6 terabytes, which would be about 6,000 gigabytes. The second part of this is giving us the remote disaster recovery capacity, and that would be about 10 or 12 terabytes. As you all know, we've discussed about data redundancy and disaster recovery. This would give us that capability off-site. And what's very good about this whole plan is that this structure is scalable. We can increase the size of the data storage capacity multiple times.
So we can lengthen our council meetings, is that it?
If that is your prerogative.
Actually, the council meetings,
there.
council meetings are going to be on the web starting tonight was the first meeting we're going to try.
We are very, very close. We could probably do that.
Yeah.
If council
The first
wishes.
meeting is tonight. We'll be on the web.
We're at the point where we can start.
Like when we're here, or is
You
it,
can do
it's
it on
just
the
a
internet.
video and you
Well,
can,
it will be about 2 days after.
2 days
It will
after.
be streaming that on the web. We're so close we could turn the switch and pretty much make it happen. So that's gone in with a lot of help. So again, we do have a couple projects that we have delayed because of this, and one of those is the remote access projects that we've had that we've not been able to move forward on. The idea is that we're going to bring in or have the capability of having all the city's applications and resources available through the web so that people can work off-site if we absolutely have to do that. This is also in keeping with the disaster recovery programs that we've discussed with council in the past. And again, it's also part of our pandemic response. If we have to have the capability of having government operating with people off-site, we can do that and provide that level of service for our citizens. The streaming of council meetings, we can get meetings up and have them functional, but going back in time or going forward in time, there's a huge storage capacity need to that because each council meeting it takes a lot of capacity, data capacity to run those.
Any council member delays the council meeting is going to be charged for additional $10 for 5 gigabytes.
How long are you
Send
going
the
to
gigabyte
keep the
jar
council
around.
meetings then?
Pardon me?
How long will you keep the council meetings in storage?
We have not yet come to that decision yet, but we thought we would go back probably a year and then move forward from that particular point. And then we should be able to do archival copies and not necessarily have them up and available, but we intend to digitize all of the council meetings that we have had thus far to date. So it'll be part of the historical record.
Well, the first goal is to start putting it on the web and then keeping that in archive, and as the time and resource allows that we try to go back and try to digitize. But as we move forward, 1 year is the time frame that we're looking for, the keeping it on our servers.
One, in terms of having it on the web at this stage, does that give the capability to go into a particular
Yes.
agenda item and just look at that agenda item?
Yes, that's part of what we're working toward is the ability to tie in the agenda. For example, you would have the agenda up on your screen or up on the site. You would then be able to point at a particular item, and the streaming would then search down to that particular point in time and start at that point. So you don't have to listen to the whole thing, or you don't have to fast forward through the whole thing. You can go to a particular point in time.
That's a cool feature. I think a lot of our citizens would like that because typically they have an interest in a particular item and certainly don't want to go through stuff they're not interested in, especially with a multi-hour meeting. And so they could go right to the item that does interest them.
Right, and so probably what we've talked about is going forward, we'll have that capability to do that. But to go backward in time and basically index all of the different agendas probably is not a good use of our time to do that. But we will be doing that. We will be doing that going forward.
One other question, if I could ask you, going back to the data storage and the disaster recovery, and I'm not talking about council meeting stuff, but how frequently do we back up critical information?
We back that up nightly at this particular point. And we do it off-site, and we do it to a large data farm. However, the applications that we have are not actually in runnable form off of the data farm. The data's there, but for example, this Springbrook software that we have our financial systems on, we do not have the capability of running that remotely on the data farm. This will give us the capacity and capability of doing that. So basically, if we're able to get an internet connection, we could log in to the second data storage array where we have it, and we'll be able actually to do payroll, pay the bills, etc., given the unlikely event, but the possible event of losing City Hall. So we'll be able to basically continue city operations remotely.
If we lose City Hall, payroll will go down too, though, won't it? No.
I'm sorry, I lost. I didn't quite catch that.
That's okay. Is the remote storage in Eastern Washington?
I prefer not to say specifically where it is, but it is
In the United States.
Well, the question is with regard to earthquake zone.
It is that has been taken into consideration. Yes,
Okay.
it will be not in the Puget Sound region.
Good.
Let's see. The other thing that is coming down is a new eGov Alliance endeavor that we're working toward, and that will require quite a bit of data storage. And that is the online plan submittal, where developers can actually submit their plans electronically, and we would then review them internally electronically. We, at this point, are developing a lot of our infrastructure plans electronically and sending them out, but we don't have the capability of bringing them in and then reviewing them in a normal process. But that is something that eGov is working toward, and one of the things that we all know that we need desperately in that instance is additional data storage capacity. One of the nice things about this is the scalability. Given this particular setup, it will be very easy to add storage to this. And it also comes with the software that will be able to manage all the data that we currently have and additional data with our existing staff. So we don't have to add staff to manage additional data and capabilities. Again, this is both hardware and software. We've got 2 data storage arrays, 6 terabyte and the 12 terabyte, and also the software that will manage that. The manufacturer that we're working with is NetApp, and the vendor that we are purchasing through is Evoxy. Both are well respected and give us high value and high functionality for what we're doing. The transfer rate, just to give you an idea, we're going to be increasing it on the disk array. The transfer rate will be about 10 times faster than what we're currently experiencing, and we do need that going forward to for the technology that we're starting to embrace, the streaming, etc. You need that high data transfer rate. This will take us forward into the future. We will provide us with the ability to have remote disaster recovery and data redundancy. And the intent is that we will take a mirror image of our system each night with the capability then of being able to run the city remotely should that need arise. The other factors involved, we've checked with our peers. Bellevue actually is looking at exactly the same technology configured slightly differently. And among the IT world, among cities, they're considered a leader. And actually, in discussing with them, they were very impressed that we were moving forward with this technology, and they gave us a good thumbs up on this one. A couple times we've been ahead of them. One was, I think in a previous presentation, we talked about virtualization of our network and our storage to run different machines or have the ability to run different machines on virtualware as opposed to different servers. We actually beat Bellevue to the punch on doing that, and so they're starting to watch what we're doing now. So kudos to Matt on that. I'd have to say that we are working with leading edge technology, but we're not on the bleeding edge. So this is tried and true technology, but we're not following the wave because we don't want to be in the slack area where what we're purchasing is old and it's going to need to be replaced in the very near future. We're working with good vendors. Appware or AppNet is a good vendor. They've been in business since 1992. They're utilized by Department of Defense, Department of Homeland Security, and a wide variety of high tech companies. We've researched some other ways to do this more cheaply, but it's hard for us to spend this kind of money, but honestly, this is the best and most logical and most efficient way to move forward using the technology. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. City Manager first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to add a few things to what Lyman has just said. By design, we've been operating with the lean staff, but we've been also arming the staff with the available technology and resources so we can get the job done most efficiently. And to that end, I think our IT department has done a phenomenal job. That young man is sitting there by himself. That usually is done by about the 3 or 4 other individuals in the similar sized cities, single-handedly running our system. And in our 10 years existence, I can only remember 2 incidents that we couldn't get the technology working for us. Part of the reason for that is that he's a forward thinker. He always looks ahead. He always keeps us with the technology to make sure that we're staying current with what's happening there. So this is an investment we had discussed at the budget time. That's why we had allocated $240,000. He's done a great job of researching and getting the price down almost $50,000. This is a well investment. This is a great investment. I wholeheartedly encourage council to approve this particular contract.
Mark.
Comments?
Yes, please.
I appreciate that staff is looking out into the future on this, particularly for disaster relief. Whatever disaster comes to us, we don't know what it is, but being this flexible, I know is going to help. I would say also that by moving towards having electronic submittals, that we then would also, and I think you're going to need to anticipate people wanting to see all this electronic submittals. The public will be able to, from their homes, be able to look at new subdivisions or new proposals that have been made in their neighborhood. And so by having more digital data, you're going to have more requests for digital data. So I just expect you to anticipate that as well. But it does mean that the public, rather than having to march down to City Hall, hopefully will be able to look at some of the electronic submittals and really have at their fingertips much more of a proposal in their neighborhood and be able to give much more accurate and timely comments and feedback to staff and to the council because of this. So there's a lot of benefits that will come from this direction, and I really support it, and thank you for looking into the future like this.
Kathy and then Nancy.
Mark, I appreciate your comments. Is it really going to be easy for people to read this? I know I have trouble reading big plans on big sheets of paper, and when people call this up on a laptop, are they actually going to be able to see the functionality, or are we going to have paper copies as well as the digital copy for people to look at?
We're talking about plan submittal?
Yeah.
Okay.
Specifically plan
I'm
submittal.
probably jumping way ahead of eGov on this. It's coming, but they have not worked out all the details of that. A larger monitor would be much easier to read, but this is a capability that we're going to need to have, but all the details have not been fleshed out yet with the eGov.
Okay.
So
Are we,
Oh,
can I?
if I can address the more of your question, Kathy, the eGov is the Electronic Government Alliance. It's a consortium of 8 cities. The cities are currently working to identify a common platform for this technology so that not only our citizens would benefit from the submittals, we also make this thing streamlined for our customers who are submitting our applications. So that is the process. Is taking some time right now.
Understand that, but my question is, are we going to need the paper copies in any event? Because reading it on a laptop, I'm not sure how the permit people are going to see all the fine details. But I wonder too, I appreciate the fact that, yes, citizens will be able to see it, but will they really be able to see all the details on a screen when normally you're looking at large sheets of paper showing all the details and the accesses and where, all the details of a plat?
Yeah, that is a very good question. We don't believe that we'll get rid of all the paper, but there are multiple copies made, is my understanding. And then they will go back and forth between, for example, the developer, the builder, and the cities. And so you have paper upon paper upon paper going back and forth. And
I
the
know, I've
idea-
seen some of the boxes. Remember in the
Yeah.
old City Hall, all the
Yeah.
boxes.
The idea basically would be able to have a data file that would be transferred back and forth, and all the changes and all the comments then would stay with that data file. This is the general concept. They haven't worked through all the details. The other large issue that they're going to have, that they're working with, which will probably be another study session, is the process that each city will have in order to review these files. Different cities are structured in different ways, and then we also have the opportunity, as opposed to a problem, of working with other providers like the water sewer system, the fire department, things like that all have an opportunity to review the plans. So we need to make sure that technology is in place with each of those vendors as well. But we will be working on that. We will be fleshing that out, and we're trying to eliminate as much paper as possible.
No, I think it's a
You're
huge
absolutely
step
right.
forward.
It is, but paper probably will be with us for a while.
Okay, thank you.
Nancy?
I had a question on that. Just for my own information, this isn't going out for bidding, I assume, and I was just wondering if there must be an exemption for that.
We actually did go out for bid on the storage. We had two people respond, or 2 companies respond. Only one of them met the needs that we had, and so this is the lowest responsible bidder.
Oh, thank you.
Other comments? Okay, then I would accept a motion to award network storage bid to, is it Evoxy or?
Yes, Evoxy.
Evoxy Consulting.
So moved.
Second?
It's been moved in second. Discussion? No discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote of 7-0, the bid is awarded.
Very good. Thank you, Council.
Thank you, Lyman.
Thank you, Matt, too.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you, Matt.
Well, let me, if I may, Mr. Mayor, I want to talk about Matt, that he's been, how many years you been with us? Almost not 10 years? And he started with us when he was a
Congratulations.
fresh high school graduate. He went to get his bachelor's degree from University of Washington. And he's been continuing to work with us, and we are so proud of him, and I can't talk highly enough about him everywhere that I go to, so doing a great job for us.
Thank you. Okay, there's no unfinished business. There's no new business. Council reports. Michelle, let's start with you.
Well, actually, I was just sitting here looking out over at the library, and I was wondering, do we have like a little update on the library? Can somebody give us an update?
We do, actually. They're getting pretty close, but I'll ask our deputy city manager to give that update. Pete?
Well, actually, while the plastic was over the outer walls, they were inside putting up interior walls, including texturing and painting them. The floor is in place. This particular structure is going to use a heat pump technology, but instead of the common one that we all know where you transfer air to air, it's using ground coil heat pumps. And the entire floor inside is covered over with concrete, but there are coils in the floor, and that will be used for heating and cooling. When you go into the library and you see air vents, that's actually just for the air exchange requirement. There's no cold or hot air being added to the facility from that. So they've taken a bold step. I'll note that another green thing about is part, but not all of the roof, uses a planting material, and will have sedums and other plants on the roof, so they are going to have a green roof. They are using rain gardens in a couple locations. They're using some porous or permeable concrete or asphalt, and for the remainder of the area outside parking, as opposed to the parking that's underneath the structure, they'll use standard stormwater capture and treatment techniques, and they'll be monitoring that, running that through their storm drainage system, through our storm drainage system, and then metering out at a slow rate into the wetland below. The windows have started to go in the last 2 weeks. An interesting construction technique is that they do the windows all along and they wait to get to the corners, and then they measure them and custom make the windows to fit the space that is left.
What's left over?
Yeah, left over. That's a good way to put it. There will be landscaping on the north wall, which faces us, that'll somewhat screen the wall. If you get a chance to walk over there in the daylight, you'll notice there's kind of a mesh over the wall, and that's for some of the climbing plants to hold on to as they grow up over the wall. So it's going to be a very attractive facility and quite complementary, although not the same design, a complementary design to ours. I'm really pleased to have worked with the contractor. I have nothing but good to say for them. They have been extremely sensitive to our needs in terms of dust and noise. They changed their work hours on Wednesdays to accommodate the farmers market. We've allowed them to run their lifts along part of the plaza, and we went out with them jointly, took photographs of cracks. If those cracks are expanded, then we'll talk about how it's going to get fixed. I don't see any evidence of that to date. They even decided to help protect our surface. They put down plywood sheets on the surface each time they run it over. So they're incurring some extra labor costs to do it, but they're great to work with. I might add that we think so highly of them, we made sure they were aware of the bid call on the maintenance and operation facility. They're going to have to compete with a lot of other contractors, but we sure like to have them in the mix. Sierra Construction from Woodinville.
31 contractors on that bidding list, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
What's the date
Sorry, I was going to ask that.
for the champagne?
I believe the library is looking at a target grand opening date of 9 January.
January 9th.
Yep.
Okay. So just a
That's
couple
not
months
firm
away.
yet, but that's what they're looking at.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Okay?
Thank you, Pete. Is that your report? What about the nightmare?
Oh, yes, the nightmare. Oh. What a relief. Yes, the nightmare at Beaver Lake ended on Halloween evening. There was about 1,000 people that went through. Numbers were down a little bit this year, more like about 8,000 people went through. There's still, the weather this year was terrible.
Yeah.
Terrible. Rained every night. I know I rode 3 nights and were soaked all 3 of those nights by the end of the night. It was a really good show. I thought there was a lot of talent out there with Scare Productions. I handled all of the development of all the sites out in the woods, and then the Rotary Club of Sammamish actually did the work in the pavilion. And the park is pretty much all cleaned up, and stuff is packed away for another year. So thank the community. We had a huge response for volunteers this year. I know that they had, the first couple of nights, they had like 120 kids and community people show up that wanted to be actors and volunteers, and they worked really hard at trying to put them all out. That required them to do makeup and have costumes for all those people. And so, that was pretty remarkable in itself that they were able to, put anybody to work that wanted to volunteer and participate. So huge success from that standpoint.
Neat.
And then all the monies that come out of that, the net monies that come out of that, once we get all the costs in, will go back into the community. I know the Rotary Club gave away $15,000 in high school scholarships last year, and another $20,000 or $30,000 worth of small amounts, $2,000s and $1,000 to various community groups. Athletes for Kids were big helpers this year. We put all those big honkin' kids to work loading the truck and unloading the truck. I don't think they'll be back next year, but they helped this year. So thank you.
Did they find the person who burned the?
Well, they have a good idea who it is, yeah, but I haven't heard any further about prosecuting the person. Kids will be kids, I guess, a
I
prank,
know.
but they could have set the whole forest on fire, for God's
No.
sake.
Fortunately, there was raining.
Yeah, it was wet.
Well, now that the nightmare's over, the good weather's come back, hasn't it?
Yeah, this week.
Lee?
No report tonight.
No report.
Nancy?
I have a report. I was traveling home from Redmond yesterday on East Lake Sammamish Parkway about 6:45 in the evening. It's the first time I've been on the parkway since coming back during the summer in August. I got stuck at 5 minutes to 6 for a huge traffic backup and then waiting. I couldn't really see all the improvements that were done, but I wasn't super impressed in terms of how it looked. But what really concerned me was there was an accident last night, and there were police cars there. It wasn't a huge major fender bender, but it backed up traffic halfway to Redmond. The car that was in the accident was stuck right next to a median strip, probably around Southeast 16th, somewhere right in that.
I'll check with the police, they don't tell me every
I could barely drive around it with going into the bike lane because there's a gubber. I was going south, coming home, and the car had been pulled way over, probably by the police or somebody. So it was way right next to the median, so cars could drive around it. But there was hardly enough room to get around. If there had been a truck or a Hummer or anything like that, traffic would have been backed up forever. I think we need to look at our design and figure out how we're going to get people. People couldn't have turned around. They would have been just stuck waiting there forever. It's a very concerning situation when you can't drive around an accident site.
Curb-to-curb dimensions are about 17 feet. It was designed to deal with this kind of emergency circumstances also, but I'll take a look at it.
Would you do that? Because, I think I was within inches of that car. And I had my smaller car, not my Suburban. I had my Subaru. And I didn't want to drive around it. It was that narrow.
That it?
I did have one more, but I've forgotten what it was.
Okay.
But anyway, I'm very disappointed in the narrowness of it. It's very challenging.
Well, I did drive on it today a couple times, and it was very beautiful on a nice sunny day.
That's the compliments we're getting also from citizens.
Mm-hmm. Kathy?
Well, I'm glad Matt is here because I was going to call him tomorrow. We're having a special regional transit committee this week to go over the executive's proposal for the transit budget. It's a special emergency meeting this Thursday. However, the last couple days I've not been able to open any attachments, and when I try to click on them, it tells me that you've accessed his website in error, so I don't know what the executive's proposal is, and I really do
You got
want
the
to know.
laptop with you?
No.
Well, it's not just her laptop. I'm having trouble, too. It ends up saying 1 kilobyte file instead of what it really should be.
Oh.
And that's the
Are you
storage
able to open
capacity
things?
problem, right? That's the problem we're trying to solve,
Yeah.
that hopefully we'll solve it
Okay, I
tonight.
didn't forward it to myself with the attachments, because sometimes send it to my
Matt,
home
why
address.
don't you come up to the microphone and
Yes, but tell us what we're doing wrong, or how we can fix it.
It's hard to say without looking at it. So if you want to bring your laptops in, I can look at all of them. You can also send me the email. I can look at the attachment also and try to figure out
Can I
what's going on
send it
from
to
that.
my home email address and open it? Do you think that'll?
It's certainly worth a shot.
Okay, I'll try that. Okay. And then at the last RTC meeting, I raised the concerns that a lot of our bus riders have had about the maintenance issues, the driver issues, and I got a 2-page email back from Victor Abeso. Felt really badly. But they are aware of the mechanical problems. I mean, last week it was raining and the bus driver got to the bus barn and they issued him a bus without windshield wipers.
oh, no.
So it took him 15 minutes to put windshield wipers on. And so everybody was late to work that day because they didn't have the buses ready. So he addressed all the issues and the fact that they are not able to hire new bus drivers. So a lot of them are temporary drivers that are filling in every day. So there are issues around that. But the good news was, and everybody was pretty excited this morning, is that starting in the February change, our buses will go in the tunnel. Which will make a huge difference given the fact that this summer everybody's borne the burden of all of the sidewalk and street repairs on 2nd and 4th, and coming home from when there's a Mariner game is literally impossible. You have to leave work early. So it's really exciting to hear that the buses will be going in the tunnel.
Good. Thank you, Kathy. Mark?
A minor one, I was just going to comment, I got an email through my son's soccer team that 60 Acres Park, which is a large natural grass soccer field system in Redmond, and it is truly 60 acres, is closed for practice now because of cold and wet weather. So it's just as a comment on the difference between the kind of artificial surfaces that we have that you can play year-round. They've suddenly had to cancel. They're still having the games at 60 acres, but the practice on the field during the week has been canceled. So it's just a comment on that. Two, the lights on the Parkway project have not been turned on. The overhead lights are not turned on yet. So people in the dark, I know, are still finding their way in that project. I certainly hope that we have created a project that is safer rather than less safe. That was the intent. So we do want to watch it over time and see if we get signals that there's some part of it that hasn't worked out quite right. But there's lights and signals that have mast arms that haven't even been turned on yet. So I think once it's lit up and all the final lights are on, I think that then we'll be able to know whether there are still some systematic problems or not.
Well, the traffic last night was backed up for a single car that you could drive around. Was backed up halfway to Redmond.
Well-
And, I mean, it's because people don't want to drive around that narrow a stretch.
Well,
you know.
that's been my commute for 20 years, so I'm well aware of what happens. In the past, though, you wouldn't have driven around it at all because the street was narrower. There was no place to pull a car off that was in an accident, so it would have been all the way to Redmond, believe me. And I don't know that I want to say whether it was better or worse than that, but having a middle lane, if you have an accident, it does have a place for people to put a car. Let's hope that it isn't the middle lane that's actually causing people to hit a curb or something like that. But we'll see. The final thing I wanted to mention was the Growth Management Planning Council, which makes a recommendation to the King County Council on growth targets, had adopted, and I sent an email stating the targets that they had adopted of 4,000 residential units from 2011 to the year 2031, 1,800 jobs, and then in our planning area of 350 residential units. And none of that was too surprising. That was kind of in line with the numbers that had been analyzed earlier. What was surprising, though, was Seattle, having balked at adopting these growth targets previously, had negotiated an agreement on a work plan to have the Puget Sound Regional Council work on a policy measure related to how funding for regional services, including transit, are funded, and whether, in their view, more of the money should be focused on urban centers and maybe pulled away from large cities such as Sammamish or small cities. Having agreed to the work plan for staff at the council, they suddenly and without telling anybody decided they would abstain from voting for the growth targets. So it left everybody there unsure as to whether we actually had a quorum and whether the vote actually, was legal, given that they were abstaining and not even voting no. They were abstaining. And this was something that, as a strategy, had not been discussed with staff in advance. So it was not a trust-building exercise on their part, and I'm concerned that the policy discussion on transit and how it's funded and who gets what allocations is going to be more difficult in the spring when this comes back before them. But I thought I'd mention it because it is showing the tensions at the regional level over funding of transit, social services, and the monies that are available or not available at the regional level.
Certainly, to follow up on that, at the Regional Transit Committee, the recommendation we have is to fund transit between urban centers, which would leave everybody who is not in an urban center, and not even to take, as much as many of us had brought it up, not even to take into consideration the fact that there are park and rides, which are basically places that we've all invested millions and millions of dollars to collect people to ride the buses, that those are not being taken into consideration along with urban centers.
Nancy?
PSRC's Growth Management Council passed Vision 2040, and we're doing the 2040 transportation plan also at PSRC. The multi-county planning policies prevail over the local counties. They have to be consistent. So, and they're not what Seattle wants. I mean, they'd have to modify those before Seattle could get its way, fortunately.
Well, this is why it's important that Suburban Cities Association and our city representatives stay active in the regional forums.
Well,
and that's what Suburban Cities Association is all about, to basically give us the clout to stand up to Seattle on some of these issues.
right, and we discussed that at PIC in the last one or two meetings, and basically Seattle was trying to essentially, I'd use the word blackmail, not legally, but force their will upon everybody else by not voting, and I understood their vote was critical to passage of the growth targets. I don't know if that's true or not, but anyway, they were basically trying to hold us hostage to get what they wanted for the funding.
Okay, is that your report, Mark?
That's it.
Good, thank you. The mayor's report, I did want to say that I attended the Beyond Oil Conference again this year. I think it's the third year in a row I've attended at the Microsoft Conference Center, put on by the Cascadia and co-sponsored by Microsoft, Ford, Puget Sound Clean Cities Coalition, Puget Sound Clean Air Agency, and others. And it was a defining moment this year, I think, because Ford Motor Company was there. Nissan is coming out with the Leaf electric vehicle next year, and the Chevy Volt, if Chevy's still around. And what it means is the major auto manufacturers are in sync with the garage mechanics that were putting out electric vehicles over the years. So I think we're going to see a transformation in the fleet fuel over the next couple of decades. Is going to be awesome, and we're going to get off the oil dependency. Oil is a strategic commodity, and when you don't have any competition, the commodity source defines the price. And so once we get our fleet to a significant percentage of electric and flex fuels, I think we'll see a very more open market in the fuel industry. And it's particularly important for Sammamish, as I've said before, because we're so vulnerable up here. We don't have the transit. Everybody's counting on their automobile And even this year, the gas stations up here were out of gas, and it's frustrating. And we are-
You didn't mention it, but the smart car is coming out with an all-electric as
That's
well as
right.
the diesel that gets 70 miles to the gallon next year.
Yeah, so that's exciting. Well, that's all I have. Next is the city manager's report. And you have less than 15 minutes to report.
We didn't bet. So it's
Oh,
not an
it-
all or nothing bet, was not agreed upon, so
Well,
I don't have any reports.
For the record, this part of the all or nothing, double or nothing bet, assumed that it was good, so after tonight, I won't owe any meals to the city manager.
What about all the coffee?
Paid? Has he ever paid?
No.
I've been hearing this for years.
What about all the coffee, Don?
Okay,
Don?
is there any executive session this evening?
There is none, Mr.
No.
Mayor.
Just one comment?
Okay,
if I
one
can.
comment.
No, actually, a comment to Melanie. I was just looking through the packet of the new applicants. Could we make sure that when we get an application from somebody that they give their home address? It's important to me that things are geographically dispersed, and one person has a PO box rather than a geographic
We'll ask them to
address.
get us to give it.
Kathy, I did contact that person with the Issaquah address.
Uh-huh.
And I did establish that she does have a Sammamish address, but she was not forthcoming with her address.
She lives on Pine Lake.
Well, I would prefer
Oh.
that we have that information, so as we look at things geographically, I know where she lives, I just don't want to guess.
Okay. Any other comments? Well, meeting adjourned.
Hey, Dan?